what's at the core of all four of these, of having health and well-being, of having wealth and prosperity, of having wisdom and understanding and purpose and meaning, is human flourishing. That's the center of this overlapping set of diagrams, is human flourishing. That is, in my mind, the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to help humanity flourish, individual by individual by individual. And that's one of the things that transformations help. And it's the ultimate reason why people buy from you.
Welcome to the Work for Humans podcast. This is Dart Lindsley. Today I'm doing something I haven't done before on Work for Humans, which is I've brought back our former guest Joe Pine for a second conversation. Joe was on the show previously to discuss the emergence of the experience economy, a term he coined, along with Gareth Gilmore, almost 20 years ago. Now, Joe has begun working on the next thing, which is his latest book around the transformation economy, which I am so excited to dig into. Joe is an author, speaker, and management advisor to Fortune 500 companies and startups. He previously served as a visiting scholar with the MIT Design Lab, a professor at Duke University, and a lecturer at Columbia University, as well as a manager at IBM. He is a co-founder of Strategic Horizons LLP and a lecturer at Northeastern University. In this episode, Joe and I talk about his latest book, which he is in the process of writing right now, examples of the transformation experiences in and out of work, and the economic value of customer transformation. We also discuss work as a transformational experience, how to create transformations for individuals' aspirations, the job outlook for experience designers as a whole, and other topics. If you find this episode valuable, stay connected to Work for Humans by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. And now, I am thrilled to present my second discussion with Joe Pine. Joe Pine, welcome again to Work for Humans.
Thanks, Dart. I appreciate being here.
This is one of the only times I've had the same person on twice. And, well, first of all, one reason is that you've been a huge influence on my work, which is I was not aware of your work until I discovered it through the World Experience Organization. And once reading it, it gave me frameworks with which to understand the experience of work that I have found incredibly valuable. And in fact, I don't even think you've seen the diagram where I mapped all of the things people want from work across the progression of economic value.
I dearly want to see that, so you need to send it to me. And I'm honored that I am one of the few that is on second.
Yeah, and it turns out that the majority of what people want from work is in the experience economy, and some of it is over in the transformation economy. So I want to talk about all of that today. Tell us about your current writing project.
Well, I've started writing the next book, sort of a follow-on degree or a sequel, but it's different than that. It's in mesh, because what I'm writing on has been there from the very beginning of the progression of economic value, the core framework in the experience economy. And by the way, since you've just learned about it recently from the World Experience Organization, I see, though, you have an original edition up on your shelf there from 1999. You didn't get the newest one.
I have both. I have both.
Oh, okay.
I have the original and I have the new one. I have the other one someplace because I know it extends to the transformation economy.
Right. We're now celebrating, we have an event actually next month where we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the experience economy of the book. But I discovered it in like early 1994. And from that beginning has been this next thing, because I'm always tending to ask what's next. I'm never satisfied with, okay, I found this thing, but if it's at any progression, then, always got to figure out what's next. So what I figured out, of course, is that it is about life transforming experiences, right? We can have memorable experiences. We can have even meaningful experiences, but we can also have transformative experiences. And when you get to that level, it really is a distinct economic offering. So it's the fifth and final, I'll say, economic offering in this progression of economic value. We're gone from commodities, the basis of the agrarian economy, through goods, the basis of the industrial economy, through services and the service economy. And then between that original 1999 or second edition, which was 2011, we switched to saying from a nascent and emerging, forthcoming experience economy to saying it's here. So we are in the experience economy, but hot on its heels is this fifth offering of transformations, where companies use experiences to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspirations. And that's what transformations are all about. And so that's the next book that I've started writing this year and hope to publish next year.
This is an unusual one of my interviews because we're going to be talking about a book that doesn't exist yet. And what you've started doing, which I think is really exciting, is you've made it available as you write it to those of us who want to follow along. And you've even been asking for advice along the way, which is a lot of fun.
Yep, and I'm doing that on Substack. It's an idea I got from Eddie Yoon, author of the book, The Super Consumers, who's one of 3 category pirates. They really help people and businesses understand their category in that. And they started doing this, and Eddie talked to me about it, says, you should do this too. And so I decided that it's a great idea. And the number one reason is, yes, I get some feedback. Yes, get some money out of it. But the number one reason is as a catalyst to write, to make sure that I write. And now I've got people that are expecting things, even people that are paying to hear it. And so that's what's worked in spades. It's just like every day I'm thinking about how can I push this forward? How can I write?
When it comes to the transformation economy, I often find myself falling apart. I talk about your work on stage. And so I'll use the example of the progression of economic value. And I start off with a coffee bean. And then I say, if you move up the progression to goods, then you've got ground coffee. And then I say a brewed cup of coffee. And then a coffee, the experience economy, is a cup of coffee in a really nice cafe with nice music and good Wi-Fi and attractive people. And then I get to the transformation economy and I say, teach people how to make coffee. I mean, I don't even know. I recognize transformations, but somehow I've never found one that I could comfortably carry from the coffee bean all the way through.
There are, in fact, companies that do teach you how to be a barista, right? Whether professionally or in your own home. Illy, the Italian manufacturer, has a offering to turn you into a barista. So you can pay a transformation. I don't know of any, but you can imagine that a company you could pay to also wean you off of coffee or off of caffeine if you wanted to, but I don't know any that do. There's 2 classic ones that go up to experiences, coffee being one, the other being a birthday party. You know, if you look at a birthday party cake where you make it from scratch, that's commodities, it's stuff, and it costs a few dimes to be able to buy the commodities that go into a birthday cake. The good step is where you buy it from, Betty Crocker, a cake mix, and Duncan Hines frosting. That's the $2 to $3 level. Then you got the $20, $30 level with the cake. And then you can go hire someplace to throw a birthday party experience that can cost you hundreds, even thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars if you want to spend that. And at the transformational level too, there aren't any well-known things, but there are companies, usually mom and pop shops, that will do things like have a birthday party focused on learning math. As weird as that sounds, there are people that love that, and other things like that. So you can't imagine that, particularly as you did it over a course of years where you can track people, you can do things around that birthday party. But one of the examples I like to show where you can easily see it, is actually if you've ever been to an eataly. Have you ever been to an eataly, Dart?
No.
Do you know what they are?
No.
Okay, then this may not help you. Eatalys are the most vibrant retail experience in the world, I think. And they're grocery stores, right? Which is what's amazing. Eat Ali, right? I thought it was an American company. I first encountered it in New York, and they're in most all major cities now and across the continent and other countries. But it is actually an Italian company based out of Bologna, Italy. Inside of there, though, they have all 5 economic offerings. You can buy the produce and the raw meat and the flour, et cetera, that goes into Italian cookie. Their theme, by the way, is a journey through culinary Italy. That's what they're all about. And they're vibrant because, well, I'll save that for when I get to the experience level. Then, of course, they have the goods made out of those commodities. You can buy canned tomato sauce. You can buy pasta that's already made for you, and you just have to throw it in the water. They have appliances, right? Anything that you can imagine cooking Italian food with, they have all those appliances and accoutrement there. Then at the services level, retail by itself is a service, right, of bringing the goods to you, the merchandising of it. Plus, they have things like quick service lunches and so forth. At the experience levels, one, being there is an experience because, again, it is so vibrant. There are people everywhere. It isn't like a normal grocery store where all of the aisles, right, are straight. You're sneaking around, you're seeing people, you run into things like all of a sudden you find yourself like sort of in line for a restaurant and you say, oh, well, I do feel hungry. Let me stop here, right? So you put your stuff to the side, you go to a restaurant, you have a wonderfully cooked Italian meal. Maybe you go to the cafe, right? Its own cafe. I think it's Laza, another Italian company, coffee and tea that they serve there at the experience level. And then they have an admission fee experience of a culinary school in every one of them, right? And anytime you think school, you're thinking, okay, I want to learn something, I want to change. They want to transform people into great Italian chefs. And the better the Italian chef you are, guess what? The more Italian meals you're going to cook, the more Italian meals you cook, guess what? The more stuff you're going to buy from Italy's, right? So there's one example that you can see going up. Another one I love, and often because I'm often talking to business audiences, I'll talk about, think about going back to school and getting an MBA. Why do you do that? It's not for the ideas. The ideas are the commodities of the business schools because all professors, they have to publish. They all got access to the same ideas. So that's not really why you go to this particular school. It's not for the books and the gear that you have to buy to be able to learn there. It's not for the pro forma teaching, the homework analysis, the other grading activities that the teacher does, right? It's not the service level. Now you get to the classroom level experience, and now we're thinking, but also about networking and the entire experience you have when you get out of your normal environment. You get into an arena where it is just rich with learning and where you really focus on that. But even that experience level is not it. Why do people go? Well, they want new skills. They want new abilities, new capabilities. They want new career path. They want a new job. They want a higher earning potential, right? They want to be a different person, right? And so that's why fundamentally that they go. You don't spend tens and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to a business school unless you see that investment paying off in a better you down the road.
A friend of mine wrote back from the University of Chicago. He went to graduate school in the economics department.
The best economics department in the world.
Oh, okay. Well, here's what he wrote from there. He said, all I wanted was a library card, and they're trying to eat my brain. And that's what I would call a transformative experience. It was more than he bought into. I think he ended up loving it. And on the topic of birthdays, I want to tie it into two other things. We had Stacey Barton on the show, who I think you know, and she designs events, bespoke events at Disney. For $1 million, that's not hyperbole. For $1 million, you can get a birthday experience that is built uniquely for your grandchild and is a one-day event that's completely staged. And we had Tia DeHaan on the show, and she spoke about ritual design. And I can very much imagine an important birthday being turned into a transformation experience through ritual, where you're saying, this is a threshold through which I'm going to pass and I'm going to be a different person. So these make sense to me. They're making a lot of sense. And if I'm a business, I guess I have two questions. Why should I care about the transformation economy? But also, how do I even know if I might have an opportunity to go and produce a transformation offering? So first question is, why do I care? Second question is, how would I recognize that I have that opportunity?
There's a host of reasons why you should care. If you think about what the progression of economic value does, it is a progression of economic value. In other words, the higher you go up, the greater economic value you can create. One of the dynamics of it, right? So I already went through one, which is the 5 economic offerings. Technically called commodification, right? Turning something that exists into an economic offering. Then there is commoditization, and goods, services, and even now experiences are increasingly commoditized, where people treat them like a commodity. They don't care who makes them. They don't care who manufactures or delivers them. They just care about price and convenience. Those are the two things that people want when an industry commoditizes. And there's always one or two companies that can make a lot of money in commoditization, right? But it's not a very fun environment because you have to automate everything, get rid of as many people as everything. Everybody else has to think about, well, do I want to live with that? So that's why starting in sort of like the 1980s, manufacturers increasingly got into the experience business as their goods started being commoditized. And increasingly, service companies get commoditized as well. And so they seek to create experiences around those services. And then at the experience level, when they become commoditized, then the next level of value, of course, is transformation. So as you and any business start to commoditize, where you start to have great price pressure, where you start not to be able to control the pricing that you have and so forth, where your offerings tend to look like everybody else's offerings in the industry, well, then you've got a great opportunity to shift up rather than somebody else doing it and then do it further commoditizing you by doing it yourself. The other third dynamic in there, another C word, is customization, which is how I originally discovered the progression of economic value from my first book, which I wrote as my master's thesis when I got my master's in management technology at MIT, to come back to that aspect. And that's what I went in for. I went in saying, I want a transformation. I'm going to become an author, right? I'm going to take my thesis. I'm going to turn it into a book. Anyway, customization, I learned, automatically turns a good into a service. And when asked, what does it turn a service into? I said, it automatically turns a service into an experience, right? And I went, whoa, that sounds good. Now, is that really true? Well, if you think about it, if you design a service that is so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the service that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn it into experience, turn it into a memorable event, create that memory, right? That's the hallmark of an experience. If you did not create a memory, then it does not rise to the level of a true distinctive experience. So then that's when I'm asking what's next as I'm figuring this out. I said, well, what does it turn an experience into? Can experiences be commoditized? Sure. They may be the easiest economic to commoditize, because the second time you have the same experience is not going to be as good as the first, and third time not as good as that. So, of course, the phrase been there, done that, that's the hallmark of a commoditized experience. So then what happens when you customize an experience? You now design an experience that's exactly what somebody needs at this moment in time. And that's when I realized, well, then that turns it into a life-transforming experience, an experience that changes us in some way, right? And so that's that fifth and final economic offering of a transformation.
One of the things you said in our first conversation, the output of a transformation is the customer. That when you have an experience, the output is a memory. But when you go through a transformation, you are the output. And there's another distinction you made, which I think is really useful, which is that experiences is time well spent, but transformations is time well invested. So oftentimes what we do in a transformation is not for the moment of transformation itself. It's for what the transformation is going to result in for us later. It's interesting. Recently, we had on the show two different guests. We had Rob Copeland, who wrote the book about Ray Dalio. And in that episode, we talked a lot about how bad it was to work at Bridgewater because it was such an extreme environment and it involved so much humiliation. But then I had somebody on the show who worked there. And what he said is, yeah, it was basically, he said, it was a horrible experience, but I wouldn't replace it. In other words, it gave me something really valuable, and I'm not sure I would do it again, but I'm glad I did it. And so definitely a transformation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those sorts of transformations that come from pain, right? I mean, like you think about fitness centers, there's a saying that without the pain, right, you don't get the gain. You have to go through that, right? And the same with working in environments like that. I was talking to somebody last week at church who did I think, I'm not sure what the first word is, like an ultra triathlon, right? Where it ends with a half marathon, and he wasn't sure he'd actually be able to make it all the way through it. And I hear a lot of people talk about it. I don't know if you know Heather Gallagher.
No.
She's at the one of the World Experience Organization's founding circles, I think. And she did an online presentation last week talking about Burning Man. And she just emphasized how much of an ordeal it is to get tickets, to be able to get there, then to finally get there. And then all you have to do to set up and everything before you ever actually experiencing anything. And the phrase she used over and over again is the struggle is real, right? You want to experience Burning Man, right? The struggle is real. But she says, almost to a person, I don't know anybody who didn't say almost these exact words that after it was done, which is Burning Man changed my life. And so there was that benefit that came out of it. And the same thing with employment and other experiences like you're talking about. There's often a lot of pain with transformations. Think about quitting smoking or losing weight or again, becoming more fit. What you think of as classic transformations, it's not a bed of roses to be able to go through that. There are very few that don't require some level of, I'll use the word pain generically. It may not be physical, could be mental, could just be struggle and hardship, but there's a lot of that with most every transformation. And somebody this morning sent me an email, talking about that. He called it a transformations that come out of a negative place. In his case, it was his mother dying, I think of cancer, and what that caused the changes in his life.
Is it accurate to say that as you go out the progression of economic value, that each offering is more co-created, that the customer has to take an increasing responsibility or partnership in making it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's why when co-creation first came about, particularly talking about experiences, I thought, well, that's like no big deal because all experiences are fundamentally co-created. They have to be. Because where does the experience happen? It happens inside of you. It's your reaction to the events that are staged in front of you. So to have a great experience, yes, they have to, the company and experience stager, as I call it, has to create that great environment, has to have that great interaction, create drama and all those other things, right? But guess what? If you're not in the mood for it, it's not going to be a great experience. You're partnering with it. So one of the things you want to do is get people in the mood. If you remember like old comedy shows and Johnny Carson Tonight shows, or if you saw the Amazing Mrs. Maisel, how they would warm up the audience in advance of a comedian getting on, right? Because if they're already smiling and like this, then they're going to get much bigger laughs than if they're sitting here like, okay, entertain me. And so you need that priming of the experience. Goods and services can be commoditized. They may or may not be co-created, right? Increasingly they are. But transformations, as you mentioned, not only happen inside of us, right? They change us from the inside out. The way I phrase what you said is the customer is the product, right? The outcome of that economic offering is a changed customer. It doesn't matter any of the goods that you use, doesn't matter any service activities you do, doesn't even matter the experiences that they underwent unless they come out of it achieving their aspiration, right? That's what the outcome is that they're looking for. And that's a new you, as we call it in the Harvard Business Review. And again, you as a transformation guider cannot do it without them. You can't force anybody to transform, largely. We have the old saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So you have to, again, be part of that. You have to co-create it. You have to be there. You have to undergo it. You have to be willing to do the things. You have to put in the work. They are your guides. That's all they can do is guide you.
I want to look at that point of guide. This is important because if I'm a business and I see the opportunity to enter into the transformation market, we can talk specifically about work as a transformation offering, but we can talk more generically about it. Each level of economic value requires a different kind of designer. Somebody who's designing the best coffee bean is somebody who's looking for efficiency, basically. It's a commodity. Somebody who's designing a good or a product is probably doing physical design, like the design of a pen. But then as you get into experience, it changes. What does a transformation designer look like? Transformation guidance designer. I don't know what to call this person.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a distinction between designing transformation and guiding it. But, experience design is fundamentally the design of time. Time well spent. You design the time that the customer spends with you. Transformations are built on top of experiences. Like experiences are built on top of services, services are goods made out of commodities, right? This is a progression. They all stand on top of each other. And so you only ever change through experiences. We are all the product of our experiences, they say. So they're much more closely intertwined than experiences with services and services are with goods, although goods and commodities are very close. You don't design commodities because they're fungible. If you design them, you turn them into a good. But with experiences, you're really designing transformative experiences. But generally, it's not one life transforming experience. Generally, it's a series of experiences that take time. And so that's what you layer atop the design of experiences, is you're still designing a transformative experiences. They're still experiences, but how do they fit together? How do they reach an end? Where the end is not just, hey, we've entertained you, or we have giving you an escapist experience or educational experience or entertainment or aesthetic experience for the last hour or two, whatever it might be. But it's how do we connect that to what's come before and how do we connect it to what's coming? So it does require a designer, but I think of that as separate than a guider. It's like Shakespeare wrote great plays, but he's not the stager of the play. He designed the words and everything, but still somebody has to come along and then do the blocking, the tackling, the set design, everything. Then actors have to come along and say the lines, which is the actual staging of it, because they're actors. So somebody can design the experience, and then somebody else comes along and is the guide, is often a coach of you through that. So they are two sort of separate things. Obviously, one person can do them both, particularly in a small company. But you also have to get back to your workplace focus, you obviously have to prepare the actors and give them time to rehearse and et cetera. You need to prepare the guides. One example that kept coming up over the last 5 minutes as you're talking is Noom, the weight loss fitness app. So they are an app that can help guide you to lose weight. But again, if you don't want to lose weight, you're not going to lose weight, but they're going to help. And they have different levels of coaches, guides. The first one now being an AI that doesn't do anything personal, but can answer questions and so forth. And then they have these mentor guides that get you involved in circles and they know about you and they can respond individually, but asynchronously. You're never talking to them live. Then they have their coaches, which do the live one-on-ones with you and where the most change are going to be. So those are the guides. And they get rigorous psychological training, right? Noom has a very big point of view where they've done a lot of research on what makes it most effective for you to be able to lose weight and how you go about that. And so they've trained these coaches in that. So somebody in Noom is designing the overall interactions and then training the coaches to be the guides through that process. And that's how companies need to go about doing it.
That's a really great example.
I know because I just wrote it in the book yesterday. I wrote Noom up yesterday.
And I'm a Noom practitioner, so it speaks to me. And it also speaks to me that you can't transform somebody who's not ready. So are there different types of transformation? And I can think of at least 3. There's probably more. I know you're working on a taxonomy, but I'm looking at exemplars here, which is, I think there's learning, which is I'm going to develop a new capability. And I think there's probably a range of different kinds of learnings. Some are very tactical learnings, and some are really, I'm a new person now after something. One is health. I seem to remember that you had medical care out in transformations originally. One is identity, which is I may not have developed a skill, I may not be healthier, but now I recognize myself as a different person. And I have an example of that. The summer after high school, I hitchhiked to Alaska to go fishing, essentially, from San Diego. And what was important about that is that at the end of that, it's not really that I learned anything, except that I now knew I was the kind of person who might hitchhike to Alaska.
If nothing else. Learn that.
If nothing else, I could say, well, I guess that's the kind of person I am. And so are there others? I've got learning, health, identity.
You're only missing one. And I know you know it, actually. So one, as I'll mention, not only are there types of transformations, there are types of transformation. In other words, there's different ways that you can look at it. And one is like, what does the actual transformative experience entail, look like? What is the difference it makes with me? And then the level you're at, I've started to call spheres of transformation. When I'm using the word sphere to basically replace the word industry, because industry is such an industrial word, and spheres have this like immersive vibe to them. And where I'll go back to is Ben Franklin's famous phrase, which is healthy, wealthy, and wise. Those are the core transformation industries: healthy, wealthy, wise. So what I've done also is I've broadened each of those and then added a fourth one. And the fourth one is the one you got. Not you missed one of the wealthy one, I think.
Wealthy. I missed wealthy.
Right. It's really about health and well-being, broadly spoken. I mean, so we think of health, we think of health care and hospitals, but how much money are people paying on Noom apps, in fitness centers, in coaches that help them, in pharmaceuticals and all these things? I think we pay more out of pocket for well-being than we pay into insurance for healthcare. So health and well-being, right? And health we tend to think of also as I'm sick or I hurt something, make it better. Well-being is no, I want to have a good life. I want to, in fact, I think of it as the Hebrew word shalom, right? Which, obviously means peace. But the way you say it is have a prosperous life. And that applies to wealth and prosperity as well. But that's the second one, from being wealthy to wealth and prosperity, right? Have a good life, be able to retire, be able to send your kids to college, be able to go on a vacation everywhere, be able to afford $1 million birthday party at Disney if that's what you want. It's not just about money as a means to the end, but the end to which you want that money. So that's health and prosperity. And school is basically wisdom and understanding. Right? Wisdom and understanding. How do I bring wisdom and understanding? And it's basically where, I not only understand things, but I have judgment. I have the ability to know what to do when and so forth. So it's a very, very large category. It doesn't just include school learning, but things you can learn from anybody, anywhere, any company, even ancillary, even to what you're doing. And then the fourth one that I add that Ben Franklin didn't think of, 250 years ago, is purpose and meaning, right? And that gets at your trip to Alaska. That gets at identity. What in my life gives my life meaning? And there are so many companies now that get into that. There are so many companies, particularly coming out of Silicon Valley, that try to instill purpose, instill meaning. I think it's the right thing to do. I find companies oftentimes go to the wrong measures and the wrong length of it. I don't know if you've read the book Work, Pray, Code.
No.
You would enjoy that work. I can see it over here. It's by Chen. I can't think of her first name. But Work, Pray, Code is all about how Silicon Valley has taken basically Hindu religion, de-religionized it, and try and brainwash their workers to want to work longer, because that's all they really care about is working longer, as opposed to caring about having whole people that have a purpose in work. I am a big proponent of the fact that work provides dignity, even if it's cleaning toilets. Work can provide dignity to people. It's better to work or not. I don't plan on ever retiring. I think retirement is a modern thing that should just be, not abolished, but you should really think closely about that. And particularly as we age, we're going to need more workers and so forth. And that work fulfills a need for purpose that has long been fulfilled by the church. And I don't in any way think, no, you don't want to get rid of the church. In fact, that can be the core to your meaning. I believe it should be the core to your meaning, to your identity. And if that's not there, we're going to go seeking it out in the marketplace and in work.
Yeah. If you ask people to describe who they are, work's always in the top 5. This is my family. This is where I'm from. This is what I do. And so it is absolutely true. And it is absolutely true that changing your work can change your identity. And so it can be transformative to go from one place to another.
I'll mention one more thing, which is that I think of all of these also of intersecting Venn diagrams, right? And originally I thought prosperity, which is why I sort of jumped the gun when I talked about Shlomo, I meant to talk about it in prosperity, was that. But then I finally realized that no, what's at the core of all 4 of these, of having health and well-being, of having wealth and prosperity, of having wisdom and understanding and purpose and meaning, is human flourishing. That's the center of this overlapping set of diagrams, is human flourishing. That is, in my mind, the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to help humanity flourish, individual by individual by individual. And that's one of the things that transformations help. All of them help. And that's why people buy from you. Yes, there are negative offerings specifically, like fentanyl and drugs and things like that, prostitution and so forth. But those are people and companies and individuals that are not trying to flourish. They're on a different path. But the core raison d'etre of business is to help humanity flourish.
So first of all, what a great vision for what business can be, that business is about human flourishing. What that means is that all companies, we talked earlier about why companies should care about transformation and consider going into it. And one reason is that it's the ultimate purpose of business, is those things that are going to create that kind of flourishing. And transformation is a huge part of it.
And it's the ultimate reason why people buy from you. Yeah, I know you're a big fan of jobs to be done. And why do people buy things? Well, you ask, well, one of the techniques I borrow from manufacturing, right? I learned this when I worked at IBM 40 years ago, was asking 5 whys. Asking 5 whys on why they buy your product until, and that's obviously it's 3, 5, 10, however many it takes, until you get down to an aspiration, right? An aspiration. Why? The classic example, right? I've seen you talk about it, is from Ted Levitt, is people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. Why do they want a 1/4-inch hole, right? Well, so you put this wall together. Why do they want the wall together? Well, so I can create a den. Why do you want a den? Well, I want a den so I have a place that I can study and think and so forth. Why do you want to study and think? Because, well, I want to write books. I want to contribute to the world. Okay, now we're talking. Now we've got something that's an aspiration, and this you're buying. So whatever level you are, commodities, goods, services, especially experiences, is you get to that why they want it, and now you've opened up a whole new set of opportunities that you can fulfill because you know the why that people are buying from you.
I want to make a clarification because I think it was such an important thing from the last conversation. Just going to repeat from the last conversation. I asked, are transformations just something for the wealthy? And the reason I brought that up is that there's this impression that you can get from the progression of economic value is that it's sort of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that the only people who are caring about yoga and personal trainers and these sorts of things that might be transformational are the wealthy. And you said, no, it has nothing to do with wealth. And I think that's important because it can seem like that.
Right. I would say nothing to do, but very little. But anyway, then there's a number of thoughts to come to my mind. And like you, I may not remember all of them when we get done. But, we talked about the $1 million birthday experience at Disney, right? If I'm not in that socioeconomic category, what am I going to do? Where I can't even afford to go to the museum for a day, or I can't afford to even hire a clown to come to my house. What am I going to do? I'm going to take my kids' friends to McDonald's Playland. And guess what? They'll have a great time. It's not $1 million experience, but they'll have a great time. Whatever socioeconomic level you're at, whatever, first world, second world, third world, whatever you're at, you will always find experiences that you can enjoy. There may not be a company there that is staging that for you, but that's the way it was in the developed world originally as well. One of the things about the progression of economic value, it's basically about turning what once was free that we did ourselves into an economic offering, into a fee, right? It's going from free to fee, because you go back to, Adam Smith and specialization, and that is that when Adam Smith wrote the book Wealth of Nations, it was actually 1776. Something significant happened here in 1776. But at that time, over 90% of the people in the United States worked on farms. But how many work on farms today? It's down to about 1%. 1% of the people work on farms. And they feed the entire rest of the 99%, whereas it took 90% of the people to feed 100% back then, thanks to technological and productivity improvements. So they got so good at that, people invented goods, the cotton gin and the John Deere tractor and all those other things that I've never been a farmer, so I don't know about, that allowed people to become more productive and allowed people where farming wasn't for them to flourish in other ways, right? And so we moved from agrarian to industrial economy. And so now we make, if I were a shoemaker way back when, I would make my own last, I would make my own tools that I use to do it. Now I pay somebody because they can do that better and I can focus on the making of shoes. Anything you look at, services and experiences, we used to be responsible for our own experiences, right? Like the McDonald's Playland. When I grew up, I remember my mom would pin the tail on the donkey and all these other games that we did at home. We had that experience. It just wasn't an economic experience. But now as we become more economic, yes, we can still continue with that, or we go to McDonald's Playland and get it, but we pay somebody else to do what we used to do for ourselves. So there is a level of, yes, development that allows you to more fully partake in each of these, but you can get them all anywhere, including transformations that you can get. But the more money you have, then the more sky's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. There's tons of transformation opportunities that you don't have to pay for.
Correct. Self-help books, right? You can do it all yourself, buy a self-help book, but then you realize, okay, self-help book. Now I want to lose weight. Let me read this book, keto diet, whatever. Okay, well, hey, let me get on Noom so I can track what I do. Oh, they can help me do it better, right? Oh, maybe I should go to a fitness center too. Let me buy the fitness center experience, right? So now I'm going from goods to services experiences. I'm buying better commodities as I'm doing that, right? It's all wrapped up into it. And then finally, I may say, I want a personal coach. I want somebody who's, I do have the economic power to be able to do that. I want somebody who's going to sit on me and make sure I achieve my aspirations and not backslide and so forth.
What's coming to mind, it's a completely incomplete thought. It's the people who got rich by selling mining gear to the 49ers who were going up into the mountains to become wealthy. And so they were seeking transformation. And the truth is, there was somebody along the way who was selling them a product, a pickaxe. And so there's something to be said for making yoga mats.
Exactly. There are always these elements. Again, they're all built on top of each other, so you always need those. And if you align what you're doing with an industry that is achieving aspirations, chances are you're going to find out how you can do that better, and you'll create more economic value because you're designing a yoga mat that actually does, for this particular poses or type of yoga or whatever it might be. You remind me too with the 49ers. I hadn't thought about that one, but every time I see these advertisements for gold, right, on TV, and Costco now sell gold bars, right? I remember there's an article like the Wall Street Journal last couple of weeks, and said they sell them for like $1,976. You go into Costco, put it in your cart, pay your credit card, and I just heard they're at $2,300 and something, right? But my thing is, wait, if you truly believe as gold is going to go up so much as you're saying, you would keep the gold. you wouldn't sell it to somebody else. But they are there to be that cog in that wheel of people buying gold and that.
If I'm in a business, and this is especially true of work, how do you determine customers' individual aspirations so that you can guide them toward the appropriate transformation?
One is, I think that a business needs to understand what business it is in at a somewhat of a generic level. It gets back to the purpose statement. I think businesses should have a meaningful purpose and what their purpose state is. So it may be around health, for example. But that doesn't mean that somebody just, I want health. Can I have $5 worth of health? Right? That doesn't work. So you have to then get down to what they're looking for. And I like to think of it as from to statement. Every aspiration can be stated from to. I want to go from this to that. And again, you can work at that generically. When I've worked with clients, I've actually given them a list of here's a bunch of from tos, generically, which ones fit, and I'll particularize it to your business. Then when you get down to the individual, what is it that they are specifically looking for? And what is their individual from to that sort of like in a nested way fits under the more generic from to that your business is about? And then how do you provide that? And to be able to get to that level, though, you need some sort of diagnosis. You need to talk with the person. You may be able to get some things from what you've seen about them or observed them, or they're already in an experience of yours, what they're doing and so forth. But you do need some sort of dialogue to get down to that individual aspiration. This is where 5 whys help. Okay, that's your aspiration. Well, why do you want that aspiration? Why? And so forth. Till you get down to the individual one that says, okay, now that we know that, we can then design the set of experiences and stage that set of experiences for you to be able to reach that aspiration.
I want to talk about the state of the experience, discipline, and profession. So you and I last year were at the first World Experience Organization Summit in London. And it was the first assembly that I know of people who are in the business of experience design. And it probably was the first time you ever saw the assembled population and the variety, the crazy variety of experience designers. So how's the health of that profession? How do you see it emerging? And is it ready for transformation as a service?
I think it is very healthy. I have been at events that included experience designers and so forth, but the World Experience Summit was the first one to really bring them all together with this incredible depth of people, as well as with experienced stagers and real estate developers and so on and so forth. And it is a very healthy discipline. They're basically hardly, I'll say a month for sure does not go by before there's not a new book out there around experience design in some way. Now there's starting to be books around transformative experience design or designing transformative experiences by a guy I know, Brad McLean, for example. And you increasingly get more of those. James Wallman, the founder of the World Experience Organization, when last year he wanted me to keynote and kick off the summit, he wanted me to talk about transformations because he knows that they are ready for it. There are already a number of them, like Heather Gallagher, who was there that I mentioned earlier, who are recognize that their experiences are meant to be transformative, not just can be, but they're specifically doing things around that. So I think the experience design field already knows for a large measure because they sort of feel it in their bones that their experiences are changing people. I once spoke to the American Association of Museums. This was probably around 20 years ago. So there are 400 or so people. They're mostly curators and managing directors of museums. And I asked for a show of hands. I said, how many of you are here today in the museum business because of some experience that happened to you as a kid? And about 40% of the hands went up. I wasn't sure what I was going to get. I don't think it was quite 50%, but 40%. Think about that. And I recently worked with a company that has kids to adult experiences. And a lot of the people in this sort of design charrette came from other design experience companies that they came out of and are mostly independent now. But they're a collective. And I told them that. I said, look at the experiences you've created. You have already transformed by happenstance, right? Just the right time with the right experience with the right kid, hundreds, maybe thousands, right? Collectively, maybe millions of kids who are going to be artists or going to be in museums or going to whatever the other examples are. When they grow up, even if it's not their vocation, maybe it's their avocation because of the experiences you created. And I think the experienced designers increasingly recognize that. Now, what happens if we could do that intentionally? What happens if we could have parents for kids recognize that, hey, there's a seed of something here. I want to see if it can grow, and brought them to an experience that can make that happen.
Yeah, in hearing biographies of many actors and musicians, and the number of times they say, well, I got on stage and people laughed at me for the first time, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. The first time they heard Thelonious Monk play the piano, they said, this is who I'm going to be. I'm going to be that transformative moment when they set a direction. And I want to do a small ad placement here. The World Experience Organization Summit is going to be on June 12th and 14th of 2024 in New York. So if you're in the US, you don't have to go to London this year. You can go to that.
And it's worldxo.org, I believe.
Yes, worldxo.org. And I will tell you, the World Experience Organization Summit blew my mind. And by the way, made me very uncomfortable on quite a few occasions, which was not transformative. It was sometimes it's just painful. So I need to explain. I wrote an article after going to the World Experience Organization. I said, hey, HR, we're going to the wrong conference. We're going to conferences which are about tools to make people more productive. And where we should be going, the conference we should be going to is the World Experience Organization, because this is where we don't know how to do things. This is the place for us to learn things that are brand new. But the kind of people who were there was the screaming lessons I mentioned. It was somebody who runs haunted houses, and he needs to teach people how to scream in a scary way. And there was somebody there who was doing taste sound pairings. What sound should you listen to when you're eating sushi, right? Whatever. And so it's like this experimental, edgy, creative, we don't know what it is yet or where the edges are. And we're exploring the full scope of this discipline. It's an exciting place to be.
It is. And there's always things that you haven't thought about. That's what amazes me. We talked earlier about my first book, Mass Customization. I basically could keep up with what was going on in that field with all the exemplars and things. And I had a real touch with it. But then once I started getting into experiences, I quickly realized I can't keep up with everything that's going on in the world. Not just individual exemplars, but genres of experience and things that you're doing. Like I missed the taste sound pairing. So there's just things that you would never imagine that people are working on.
And there was one person who I learned about at the WXO, but who wasn't there. I think it was you and me and Tio DeHaan talking at a table. And she told us about Odyssey Works, which designs 3-month experiences for one. They bring together 100 artists sometimes to design an experience for one person.
It was the second company I'd heard of that basically took their inspiration from the 1997 movie The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. This is what I often answer about the birthday party experience, right? What's a birthday party transformation is watch the movie The Game. And it was well over $1 million that was spent on this. It looked like about 10 million when Sean Penn wrote the check at the end. But basically, it was designed very individually around Michael Douglas. The company was Consumer Recreation Services, CRS, but it was really consumer transformations. And they did a diagnosis. They had physically, mentally, cognitively to see what he could bear and what was the one thing in his life that he needed to directly face that would get him out from being a miserable old man. And they designed around that, and it happened wonderfully, and it all came together. And that's what Honesty Works is basically doing around that. It's just amazing.
I have a set of closing questions that I usually ask at the end. And one of them is, what job do you hire your job to do for you?
So one, I don't have a job. I don't even have a profession.
I sometimes change it to work. I sometimes think, what job do you hire your work to do for you?
Right, which is my life. I always say my purpose is to figure out what's going on in the world of business and then develop frameworks that first describe what's happening and then prescribe what companies can do about it. I hate it when people call me a motivational speaker. It just drives me crazy. It's like, no, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not entertaining. Yes, I am entertaining, but I'm not an entertainment speaker. I'm giving you frameworks that allow you to think differently. I want to at least have the transformation of every speech or every workshop that I do, that you think differently about how to create value in the world, and then hopefully have gained knowledge about how to go about doing that. And the other transformational offering we have is our certified experienced accounting experts, right? You spend 4 days and you get immersed in this and you come out as an expert on the experienced accounting, including transformations. Probably need to do a specific transformation certification after the book comes out or an add-on to it. And so that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me excited, is figuring these things out and describing it in a way that allows people to see it and then to do something about it. You remind me too, like with your WXO comments, is when the book first came out, and then more so actually in the 5 years, not so much in between, but when the book first came out, the highest compliment I got and the most frequent compliment I got was people telling me, thank you for giving me a vocabulary to describe what it is I do for a living. Because now they can talk about their work in a way that says, hey, I'm an experienced designer, or I'm an experienced stager, right? I create experiences. These are a real thing. You know, often they talk about their parents. My parents have no idea what I do. They just this fluffy sort of thing. But no, this is a real thing. This provides value to the world.
Right. It's economic value. And by the way, you should pay me.
That's right.
Because I do think at the very edge of the experience economy, people look like poets and artists, which they are. But they are also can be tied into the business world in ways that the business world doesn't always recognize. And so it's a really important thing. And what does your work cost you?
Two things come to mind. And the one is a false thing. But I was going to say it cost me time, in that I have to spend a lot of time doing this. I read 3 newspapers. It used to be 4 until the Financial Times stopped printing in Minnesota. I get scores of magazines. I read scores of books every year. And I sacrifice some things, but it's really not a big sacrifice because basically I'm an antisocial introvert. so just being alone and studying and thinking in my office here is a big deal. The other thing it cost me is, to a large measure, it cost me the ability to just experience something.
Oh.
I have to analyze it. I can't go into an experience without analyzing it. And even sort of transformative stuff is hard to turn that off. The only place I consistently do is actually going to a movie theater, or 2 places, movie theater and golfing. Right? If I go to a movie theater, unless they make a big mistake where they screw up how they're matching scenes together, right? I can just let it be immersed, let it wash over me, have a great experience, and talk about it with my wife afterward. And the other is golfing. Golfing, where I just go, for 4 hours out into God's creation and just experience it. You've got conversations, you've got alone time, you've got the unbelievably hard task of trying to get that ball in the hole, the least amount of strokes. And so those are really the two places where I can go and not analyze. There's basically nothing else.
I don't want to screw up movies for you, but so a lot of times when I'm doing the show, I relate it to other shows, other people I've interviewed. And in a lot of times that's just because they're all connected by my interests. But in this case, they're actually quite often connected by your work. In other words, I read your stuff, and I went and I said, I need to talk to somebody like that. And one of them was John Truby. He's a scriptwriter. And he wrote the book, The Anatomy of Genres. And what was really interesting about that from a transformation perspective is that there's the surface of the genre and the beats that somebody goes through. But underneath that, there's the transformation that is unique to each genre. Don't listen to that episode. It'll mess up movies for you.
Right. It's similar about genres of music too, by the way. That what makes up a genre of music, what is the particular things that you can say? Obviously, you got crossovers and that sort of thing. I wrote a book as preparation for a book on authenticity because people view what is authentic country music and so forth. And it's got to have these elements, but nobody's ever sat down and decided what those elements are. They know it when they hear it and so forth, and can pick apart, genres.
That's super interesting. Where can people learn more about, especially your current project? Where can they find that?
The current project, they can find it at transformationsbook.substack.com. So it's a subdomain under Substack, a place where creators go and write and people can subscribe free or paid. And transformations with an S, transformationsbook.substack.com. And then you can already see what is out there. I've just finished yesterday I called a complete, but actually not finished, to go back on what I said, to not finished chapter on the time model, which is the time wasted, the time well saved of services, the time well spent, the time well invested, which very much, by the way, apply all those four things to employees. Companies need to do that. So I'm going to put that out next week on the Substack as a full chapter, and then I'll extend it when I get feedback. But I'll have like a partial chapter, or here's just a framework. Here's a core framework. My last post was, here's two frameworks. They're sort of complementary, but at odds with each other. Which one do you think I should do? In other cases, it's just here's an exemplar, like Italy, I describe as, here's an exemplar. So you can see, all 5 economic offerings in one place will be coming up. And then as I get feedback, as I continue writing, then I'll just build all those out until I finally got the full chapters in the book. And then you can also learn, a company's name is Strategic Horizons, also with an S, Strategic Horizons LLP. And so strategichorizons.com has a whole page on me, has the ability to see all our offerings, including our certification offering, which we're doing a virtual one in June. And there's a contact page where you can put your email in if you want to get our quarterly field notes newsletter, as well as our other emails and announcements, like on our events and our writings, when we publish things. It's a great place to go to sort of keep up with what I think is going on in the experience economy. And you can always link in with me as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on the show again.
Pleasure, Dart. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it very much.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Work for Humans. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And share the show with one person you think would get value from it. Believe it or not, this really helps us grow the show and reach more people who want to build the kind of work that people really want. As always, thank you to my producer, Jason Ames at Ninth Path Audio, for his insights into content and his high standard for quality. Final note, the opinions shared here are my own and not the views of Google or Cisco Systems. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.